I'll never forget the first time she walked into the living room with one green sock and one pink sock and an orange shirt and red pants. And I said, "Is that how you're going to school?" And she said, "Yes, because I get to decide how I go to school." And I think perhaps I was still too young to understand what independence really looks like. But that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and when I first learned what Independence Day was all about, the 4th of July, which we just celebrated here in America, I really thought, it was about barbecues and flags and music and things blowing up in the air, and all of that is really cool when you're a guy, especially a young guy. You get to blow things up. And back in the day, we got to light this stuff ourselves. We would light firecrackers and put them in Coke cans. We'd blow up spiders. I remember lighting almost an entire brick of black cats on the back porch inside the city limits to kill one tarantula the size of a baseball mitt. It was a big furry tarantula. We had all over Central Texas. We had them, and we had one on our back porch that thought it ruled the roost until it met the black cats. We were cleaning up spider from the roof for a while. But we had a blast blasting that spider. And we thought that's what the 4th of July is all about. I mean, there's only a couple of times a year you can buy fireworks. We want to pop them off all over the place. We want to shoot those bottle rockets. They call them bottle rockets because you're supposed to put the stick inside the Coke bottle and hold on to the Coke bottle and let the rocket fly out. I recently saw some videos of geniuses that decided they were supposed to hold on to the stick until it blew up in their hand. Not a good idea. That's not how you do it. You got to learn how to do these things right. We learned at a young age. Even the sparklers, we learned how to have wars with those. That is not what 4th of July is about. It's not about the glow sticks and the popsicles and the popcorn and the snow cones. It's not about any of that. While all of those are good, that's not what it was for. No. Freedom, liberty, independence. Those are three words that get used interchangeably quite a bit. And I think for good reason. But I also think sometimes it's just a matter of, laziness, for a lack of better definition. It's people who say, freedom, liberty, independence, we can say what we want, we do what we want. Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, you've all heard the old adage, it's freedom of speech until you yell fire in a crowded theater. But see, there's something else to it, a little more than that. I want to share with you from my 1919 Webster's Dictionary here. This is liberty. The definition of liberty: freedom, right, or power to do as one likes. Privileges enjoyed by grant. That's not a person grant. That means these are privileges. Liberty is a privilege given to you. You gotta let that one settle in for a second. Liberty is a privilege given to you. Okay, so let's go back to independence. What is independence if it's not the same as liberty? Independence. Independence is freedom from assistance by others or from rule by others. From assistance or from rule. This is not a freedom that's granted to you. This is freedom from their rule or their assistance. And go back to one more. This is the actual definition of freedom according to the 1919 Webster's Dictionary. The state of being free, independence, liberty, lack of restraint, abuse or familiarity. Synonyms: liberty, freedom, means the absence of restraint. Liberty is our freedom from previous restraints. We value our freedom of speech in America. Prisoners are set at liberty. Remember, liberty is what's granted. It's something you enjoy because it's granted. Antonyms: bondage, captivity, slavery. Freedom of the seas is the principle of the free use of the ocean waters outside territorial limits for commerce of all nations in wartime as in peace. Again, Webster's Dictionary, 1919. So over 100 years ago, there was a distinguished marker, if you will, between freedom and independence. Freedom means without restraint. Freedom means you get to make your own choices. Independence means you have no restraint, but you also have no assistance. And liberty is that freedom which is granted to you. For liberty and justice for all, I believe, is a pretty powerful phrase. It's the freedom which is granted to you. Now you might ask yourself, who granted it? I have heard many people mistake the word guaranteed for granted. They're not the same. Of course, a lot of people take marble for granted because they interchange the words granite and granted, and they are not the same. But to have liberty means that someone has granted you freedom. Someone who had the authority to keep you in restraints and chose not to. That's a big deal. It's also a big deal to realize that liberty can be abused. Liberty, when we were in the military, meant base freedom. It meant the ability to leave the base, the military base. You could go off base to go shopping or go to school or go to church or do whatever you wanted to do off the base. But when we were in Honduras, we were under terrorist threat, and there was no base liberty. You were not allowed to leave the base. If you did leave the base, it was only with armed security. It was only with an anti-terrorism team. It was only with the escort of a security force that could protect you. Now, that's not liberty. We didn't have the independence to leave the base. Well, why not? Well, because we're in uniform. We're property of, I don't know if you know this or not, but that term GI, that means government issue. That means you are the property of the U.S. government. They kind of own you while you're using that uniform, wearing that uniform, getting that paycheck. You pretty much do what you're told to. Even on the term that you are serving in the military, you don't have the same freedom of speech rights because you're no longer your own person. Because you're in uniform, you speak on behalf of. And you will find there are a lot of people who have found themselves in deep trouble because their opinions, which I have a couple, and their opinions are strong, and I have a couple of those too, but they also have the restriction of still being in the military or on active duty or serving in a government office. There are actually laws against using the leverage of your government office to make statements that are your opinion or to the benefit of your own business. There's actually violatable federal laws against that. So when you promote your business as a military member or as a politician, and you use the leverage of your office to do that, you're in violation of that law. Did you lose the freedom of speech? No, but it does have capacities. We didn't lose the ability to move around the base while we were under terrorist lockdown. We just lost the ability or the opportunity to leave the base. Why? Because base liberty is granted, not guaranteed, but granted. The right to leave the base was not our decision. It was a decision of our commanding officers. And our commanding officers felt like this is a dangerous thing for you to leave the base right now. We don't want you to be at threat because we don't have to expend the men or the money to come and get you should you be kidnapped or injured in some way. Now, see, freedom to a lot of people means I get to do whatever I want to, whenever I want to whatever extent that I want to. And while there's some hint of that in freedom, that it's without restraint, there's also this moral responsibility that your freedom doesn't extend to the end of my nose. You get to do whatever you want to until you punch me in the nose, and then things change. There's a FAFO quotient that maybe you should check out, but there's also laws on a lot of different lands. In the U.S., we have specific laws about assault. And your freedom to swing your arms about ends at the end of my nose. And mine the same with your nose. Should I swing my arms about wildly and accidentally clip your nose, it's still assault, intentional or otherwise. That's a big deal because it means you're free to do whatever you want to until it harms somebody else. You're free to come and go. You're free to travel. You're free to speak your mind. You're free to write what you want to. All of those things are freedoms. But you also need to understand some of them are liberties. There are certain things that you're free to do because those liberties were granted to you. Granted by your neighbors, granted by the state, granted by your creator. It would be important to understand the difference between those. What liberties do you have as an American citizen that others don't have? You should look that up. What liberties do you have? Liberties that are granted by the state, liberties that are granted by your driver's license, as an example. Do you need the liberty to come and go? Do you need a driver's license granted to you by the state to have permission to come from one place to another? Maybe you should look that up. Maybe you should understand what your freedoms are versus your liberties. And then, of course, we come to the whole other meaning of independence, where we think initially that freedom and independence and even liberty, they're interchangeable, but independence doesn't just mean free from abuse or restraint. Independence also means you're on your own, baby. Good luck with that. I watched a great movie this weekend, and one of those movies, that movie was called The Sound of Freedom, but there was a scene in the movie where the guy says, I want to finish this project and it's going to take X, Y, and Z. And his boss said, I can only go so far with this. And you've kind of reached the end of the protection that I can provide you. From here on out, you're on your own. That means you're on your own dime. You've got to pay the bill yourself. If you're going to do this, if you're going forward with this, you're going to have to pay the bill. If you're going to go forward with this, you've got to provide your own protection. If you're going to go forward with this, you're on your own. The cavalry's not coming. Do what you got to do. But you are independent. Independent. No longer dependent. Free from abuse or restraint, but also free from assistance. See, when my daughter decided that she wanted to wear all these mismatched colors, and in my opinion, it's just my opinion, it looked like a clown. Independence says, you don't need my assistance. You can do this all on your own. Well, what she wanted was freedom, but she still wanted to ride to school. She wanted the freedom to dress the way that she wanted to say the things she wants to live the way she wants to, but she still wanted me to pay for the food and the electricity and the warm bath water and the shampoo and the funny looking socks. Isn't that bizarre? And yet I want you to think, how many people do you know as Americans who decry their freedom? I want my freedom. Let us say what we want to say. Let us live how we want to live. And they cry out they want independence, and yet they're lined up to get a check. We want our freedom, we want our independence, and we want you to pay for college. Does that strike you as odd? That the freedom and the independence, they seem to be interchangeable to the extent that there's an expectation that not only am I free to do whatever I want to, but you get to pay the bill. I do what I want to, and you pay the bill. See, that comes back kind of to that, your freedom to swing your arms about wildly ends at the end of my nose, because at that moment it goes from a right or a freedom to assault. And at that moment, you've kind of violated the law. And now you're risking losing whatever freedom you had. See, all these things are directly tied, but they also all point to one very significant factor. The relationship between freedom and independence and liberty is responsibility. The one thing they all have in common is responsibility. If you've ever been in a group setting where a liberty was granted to you by those who had the authority, the power to make the decision to grant you that liberty, and one person in your group abused that liberty, took massive advantage of what they were allowed to do, the freedom, if you were, that they were granted, they really stretched it as far as they could. In fact, probably a little too far. And then suddenly, nobody has the freedom they had before. The rules change. The policies change. Suddenly, what you thought you were free to do, you're no longer allowed to do. See, there are certain rights that are granted by parents. And if you stay out past your curfew, the liberty to be up till midnight might become a liberty to be up until, say, 10 o'clock. The liberty to come and go as you please as long as you're in the bed by 10 o'clock becomes, you're grounded, you're not leaving the house for 2 weeks. See, these are liberties granted by someone who has the authority to revoke them. Freedom would imply you can do whatever you want to, whenever you want to. Independence says you can do that, but good luck with that. Because if you're fully independent, you make all the decisions on your own, you also pay for all the consequences on your own. You get a speeding ticket, guess who's paying that? You have to have car insurance, guess who's paying that? You need to have a car with fuel in it? How strange is that? Guess who's paying for that? See, teenagers, I know, I've raised 4 of them, of my own and a couple of extras. They love the idea of the liberty that comes with having a car. The freedom of that. The liberty. Driver's license is a liberty because it's a granted privilege. Yeah. Driver's license isn't freedom. It's liberty, but it's not freedom. Freedom would mean you can do whatever you want to, whenever you want to, right? Independence would say, well, now that you have your license, which is a liberty, and a car, which gives you the freedom to come and go as you please, you're not fully independent until you can pay all those bills on your own. You're paying your own car payment. You're paying for your own fuel, your own maintenance, your own repairs, your own insurance, your own wrecks, your own tires, your own tickets. If you're not paying for all that yet, you might have some liberty granted to you by your parents with the vehicle and some liberty granted to you by the state with a license, but you're not yet independent. Independent means you're self-sufficient. You can do all this on your own, which, again, there's that pesky word, responsibility. See, one of the challenges that we find around the world is that everybody wants the freedom to do what they want to do. They want to make their own decisions. They want to be free of anybody else's abuse or telling them what to do. And yet they don't want the responsibility of the consequences of those choices. I want freedom of choice. I just don't want to be held responsible when I make a bad choice. I want to be able to choose whatever I want to choose. I just don't want you to tell me when it was a bad one. And I certainly don't want the consequences of bad choices. I only want the benefits of the good choices and the fun of the freedom. And when we confuse freedom with liberty, when we confuse freedom with independence, we forget that we have ultimate responsibility. Let me take that one step further. So long as you enjoy the freedoms that you have, the liberties that have been granted to you, the independence to make decisions on your own and cover your own consequences, they are perpetually at risk. Freedom, liberty, and independence are perpetually at risk. Because there will always be someone who feels like they can and should make better decisions for you. Better decisions about how you spend your money, better decisions about where you go to school, better decisions about what kind of food you eat, better decisions about the health care that you have or don't have. There are always people who feel like they can make better decisions for your life than you can. Which means, so long as you're alive, your liberty, your freedom, your independence are at risk. And the minute you stop fighting to defend them, the minute you stop speaking out when they're infringed upon, the minute you stop declaring that independence, that's the day you lose it. And at that point, You become enslaved by a mindset, enslaved by financial restraints, enslaved by educational restraints. Oh yeah, if you don't think that being lied to about history is a restraint, you misunderstand restraint. Restraint means you're limited in your ability by someone else. If you just don't know because someone told you a lie, or you just don't know because that truth has been hidden, your lack of awareness is by itself a restraint. Good leaders understand this principle. They understand that the one thing that ties freedom, liberty, and independence together is responsibility. And that responsibility goes two ways. Number one is to be responsible with the liberties that you're granted, the independence that you have, and the freedoms that you enjoy. It's also the responsibility to take care of them, to mind the store, so to speak, to make sure that burglars don't come in the middle of the night and steal everything you own. Every liberty, every privilege, every right that you've ever had will be stolen from you by someone who feels like they can make better decisions for you than you can make for yourself, usually because there's money and power attached. If there's money in decisions you make, somebody else wants to make them for you so they can make the money. If there's power in the decisions that you make, somebody else wants that power more than you do, and they will snatch it from you. It's guaranteed. If you want to keep the liberties granted to you, if you want to hold on to the independence of making decisions all on your own and facing the consequences yourself, if you want to remain free and unrestrained, you've got to fight to protect it. That means recognizing where it's being encroached upon and not remaining silent when that time comes. Good leaders are aware of all of these things, and they're constantly active about watching the store. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
Hi, my name is Christina Knowles, and I just got done taking Jay Loren's Story Power Masterclass. It was amazing. I took away so much information. One of the things that I really enjoyed being formally trained in media many years ago is the call to action. I will use that with every speaking engagement, and I'm so grateful that Loren just spoke truth into his teachings, and he is a true professional. And I know this might sound weird, but I've been taking certifications in different classes over the years, and Loren is not boring. I can't even believe I got here at 9, and then the class went by so fast that I was like, it's time to go already? And I was shocked that it was time to go already. So it's an awesome class. You're going to enjoy it, I promise.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my